We're going to get started. Welcome. Good evening, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Aloni, and I'm with Schneps Media. Schneps Media publishes over 70 newspapers, magazines, and websites throughout Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, Westchester, Long Island, and Philadelphia. Tonight, we're thrilled to bring to you How to Vote Safely in 2020, which is sponsored by AARP New York. AARP is fighting to protect 50-plus voters and make your voice heard on the issues that matter. Protecting Social Security and Medicare, lowering prescription drug prices, and ensuring you can vote safely from home and in person. AARP has a proud 34-year history of nonpartisan voter engagement and does not endorse or oppose candidates, nor does AARP make contributions to political campaigns or candidates. But AARP does urge you to vote. And AARP New York advocated successfully for a new state law that allows any registered voter to vote by absentee ballot this election by citing concern about the coronavirus and other recent reforms. AARP New York wants to help you cast your vote safely and make sure you know all your voting options.
The pandemic has made everything harder, including how we vote. That's why AARP is fighting to protect Americans 50 plus by making sure you can still vote safely. We've gathered all the latest information about your voting options at our website. So no matter how you choose to vote, you can learn how to cast your ballot safely and securely. Learn more about your voting options and make your voice heard.
Thank you again, AARP New York. Now I'd like to introduce Robb Pozarycki. He's the editor-in-chief of Schneps Media's AM New York Metro, The Villager, Chelsea Now, Manhattan Express, and Downtown Express. Good evening, Robb.
Good evening. Thank you, Elizabeth, and good evening, everybody. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight for this important seminar on all the important general election coming up. We're pleased to be joined tonight by two experts who will be speaking to us about how to exercise our vote safely and as the election day draws near. And we have the first round of voting beginning this weekend with early voting starting on Saturday, October 24th. So the first person I'd like to introduce to you tonight is Valerie Vasquez, the Director of Communications and Public Affairs at the New York City Board of Elections. Welcome, Valerie. Can you share with us a little bit about your role at the BOE?
Good evening. I want to first start by thanking you for organizing this. This is exactly the type of forum that New York City voters need to educate themselves in advance of the election. I am the Director of Communications and Public Affairs for the New York City Board of Elections. And that just basically means I'm not only the agency spokesperson, but I also manage just overall campaign themes that we have and focus on public education throughout the city of New York. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to this panel.
All right, thank you very much, Valerie. And we're also joined today by Kevin Jones, the Associate State Director of Advocacy at the AARP New York Chapter. Kevin has worked with government relations and advocacy groups for about 20 years. Kevin, tell us about yourself.
Great, thank you. Again, my name is Kevin Jones, and I'm the Associate State Director for Advocacy here at AARP New York. My role is concentrated on all levels of government in New York City, including the New York City Council and mayoral administrations, as well as the New York City delegations to Congress and the state legislature. So I want to thank Schneps for hosting this webinar, and I want to thank Valerie from the New York City Board of Elections as well for participating in this discussion on how New Yorkers 50 plus can safely exercise their right to vote, either from home, at in-person early voting, or in person on election day.
All right, thank you very much, Kevin. And I just want to remind everybody what Elizabeth said at the start of the session tonight. We're here to answer all sorts of questions about the election coming up and voting. Feel free to use the chat function. Send in the questions as much as we can. We'll do our best to answer them as we go along. So we're focusing on 5 topics for the most part in this seminar: the key deadlines that are coming up, the safety measures being put in place to make sure you're safe when you vote, how to find your polling place. Some polling places may have changed. You may not know your polling place. We're going to find out for you. And we're going to tell you how you can find out about it. There's also a lot of information about absentee and mail-in voting. And we'll get all the questions we can addressed in the next hour. So Valerie, I want to begin with the key deadlines that that are in place for voting. We passed the October 9 deadline to register to vote in the election. So, that's it. And then of course, Saturday is the start of early voting. So would you like to go over the
Sure.
key dates going forward?
So as you mentioned, the deadline to register to vote was October 9th. I am happy to report that from September 1st through October 9th, the Board of Elections registered over 168,000 new voters to register to vote. So we encourage all voters to exercise their right to vote in this upcoming election. The next deadline is actually October 27th, and that is the last date a voter can request an absentee ballot application. So they must have their request either sent to us via the portal, or they must be postmarked by the 27th in order for it to be eligible.
Okay. Could you describe, Kevin, what the organization is doing and what AARP is doing to kind of remind the public about the key dates coming up?
Sure. And I think with deadlines passing, especially for things like absentee and early voting being so new, we're trying in as many ways as possible to communicate with our members exactly what the deadlines are, what's required of them, what you need to know for each one. We're using webinars like this. We're going to have phone calls going out to our members to remind them when early voting starts. We're doing a lot on social media. We have an online voter portal, which is aarp.org/nyvotes, or nyvota if you want the information in Spanish. I think for us, the key is to get the information out there early and often to make sure that the message gets through. It's like email, social media, phone calls, anything we can do to make sure people know that voting is going to be a little different this year, but you actually have additional opportunities to make your voice heard.
All right. Let's talk about early voting. That's the first big thing coming up here. New Yorkers have been anxious to get back to the polling places. Last year we had the first go around of early voting. It was kind of light turnout. I think it's safe to say that this year will be a complete difference. Valerie, could you walk us through what early voters should expect when they come to the polling place, their designated polling site on October 24?
So first, I want to reiterate that voters are assigned to an early voting location.
Right.
So you must you must go to the early voting site that you are assigned to. We are encouraging voters to either review their mailing that was sent to them in late September, early October, that designated their assigned early voting site, or visit findmypollsite.vote.nyc. If you put in your street address, you will be able to see your assigned early voting location, as well as your election day site, the hours and the dates for early voting, and you can actually view your sample ballot. So if voters actually avail themselves of the 9 days of early voting, there are varying hours of operation, so I encourage you to visit the website as well for that. We have 2 weekends, as well as early morning. Some days the sites are open as early as 7 a.m. as well as evening of hours as well. There are other days where the sites are open until 8 p.m. So you would actually show up at your assigned early voting site. We encourage voters to bring in their FastPass tag or key fob, which was also within this mailing. If you bring that in, it's not required, but if you bring it in, then it will allow you to skip the information table. You can essentially, it's any line, anytime. So as an available, as a table is available, you would go to to that particular table. They would scan you in. This also allows for contactless check-in. You would then get your ballot, go to a privacy booth, mark your ballot, it'll be scanned. So again, this is another measure, a way that we're hoping to keep New Yorkers safe by having contactless check-in. There will be very numerous safety precautions at the poll site as well, everything from PPE to sneeze guards.
Right, and that was, if you want to just elaborate that a little bit further about, because we know that during the June 23rd primary, there were a lot of steps taken at each polling site to keep not just the voters safe, but also the poll workers safe. Masks, social distancing, sanitizers. Would you care to just elaborate on that a little further?
Sure. So we put a lot of thought into keeping the voter and the poll worker safe. That was for the June election, and we've carried that over obviously into this general election. So voters will see floor decals on the floor to encourage social distancing. There will be at check-in, there will be at the information table, there will be a poll worker that will have masks for voters if they do not have one. There will be antiseptic swipe available for them. All poll workers will be wearing masks. At the table, there will be a sneeze guard to protect not only the poll worker, but the voter. As the voter checks in, they are given a pen/stylus that allows them to mark their ballot to check in on the poll pad and mark their ballot using the pen. Again, not having to share that, reducing that risk of contamination. The early voting sites at the close of polls, they will be professionally cleaned. We have a cleaning crew that will come in and sanitize all of them. We also have sanitizing wipes, and the poll workers have been trained to consistently wipe down the machines, again, to keep everyone safe. So there's been a lot of thought into keeping the voters safe. We're hoping that voters can feel confident and safe as they mark their ballots for the general election.
So,
Can I just
go
one
ahead.
thing? When Valerie was talking about the polling locations and how to look those up, it's really important that people who think they know what their voter location is based on where they voted in the past, to still go ahead and look up and confirm that before you go vote. Because of the pandemic, a lot of places that were used for voting in the past, or some of the places I should say, that were used for voting in the past are not being used this time, just for safety and logistical reasons. So if you think that you know, that's great, but just go ahead and take a check, or take a minute to check before you leave. And also, I just wanted to show that I got my fast in the mail, at the end of last week, so I'm very excited. One more thing for my keychain.
Just like Disney World.
Yeah, exactly.
So, with the safety precautions in place, we know that, and there is a mask wearing order out in the city and state. People need to wear a mask when they're out in public, but we know not everybody's obeying that rule. So if a voter who comes to the polling site, whether it's early voting or the regular polling site, and doesn't have a mask, what happens, Valerie?
So we cannot enforce if an individual chooses not to wear a mask. However, we also, for the very first time, we will have something called line management. So it's a new poll worker position, and essentially what they will do is walk the line and help poll voters as well. One of the things that they will be doing is, if they identify that a voter is not wearing a mask or refuses to wear a mask, then they will ask that voter provide more distance between him and her, or herself, between the other voters that are online. They won't lose their place in line, but there will just be additional social distance requested for that particular voter.
Right. And if they're showing symptoms.
Sorry, and then to say, we've had some members express some concern about other voters not wearing masks around them. So that's something that we're also making sure that folks know, is that if they are uncomfortable, or if they feel that it's not safe or healthy for them to be where they are, to go ahead and reach out to the poll workers there, and go to them first to figure out what the best next step or course of action is for that.
Absolutely. So within each poll site, there will be coordinators, 2 coordinators, one from each party. They're wearing identification. They are essentially the management at that particular site. So encourage them to visit the coordinator if there are any concerns. But now, even before getting into the poll site, there will be these line management poll workers that will help them as well.
Right. And this rule also applies to anyone who might show up exhibiting any symptom?
So there will not be any temperature checks or any way for us to to be aware of that. But again, if there are any voters that are either tested positive or not feeling well, we do suggest that they vote via absentee, or even though the deadline is October 27th, I do want to say that October 27th deadline is for requests that come in, either printed requests or via the portal. If a voter chooses, they can go to the borough office all the way up until November 2nd in person and request an absentee ballot. So if a person is not feeling well, they can print out the application. Someone can drop it off at the borough office, and they would be given, if they designate and they sign, you can assign for an individual to pick it up, your ballot for you, if you're not feeling well.
Right, and we're going to touch upon absentee ballots in just a moment, but I wanted to go back to just the polling site locations themselves.
Mhm.
Uh, excuse me, not just for early voting, but also for regular voting on November 3rd. And one concern we've heard is electioneering, which we know is not allowed within 150 feet, I believe, of the polling site. But there still might be people further down the block, 250 feet away, who might be a little intimidating to voters. What should a voter do if they encounter people who are electioneering that close to their polling site?
So the board does not tolerate any electioneering nor any voter intimidation. So we have on site, we have the coordinators that I mentioned before, as well as NYPD officers. Now, within the 150 feet, there is absolutely no electioneering. If there was an individual who felt that there was instances of electioneering happening, then we ask them to please contact the coordinators on site, and we will make sure that we'll handle it. And if it needed to get escalated, we send out assembly district monitoring teams to make sure that we put an end to it.
Right. Kevin, you want to add to that?
That also goes for any paraphernalia. So if a voter cannot go to his or her poll site wearing a shirt or even a mask that references one particular candidate, that is considered electioneering. Our staff, our poll workers have been instructed, in this case, the voter would have to cover up, they'd have to close up their jacket, or they'd have to turn their mask inside out, because that too in of itself is considered electioneering.
That's a very good point. Kevin, do you want to add a follow-up on that?
Oh, just that, we've had a few members as well express, concern about, either intimidation or electioneering that close. And to, echo what Valerie said, and this is actually something I learned from her, was that the best course of action is to immediately contact if you feel uncomfortable or threatened in any way. We're encouraging our members to speak directly to the poll site coordinator or the poll workers there, and let them know first, and take their lead on what to do next, because we want to make sure that everyone that shows up is comfortable and feels safe while they're voting. So we're just encouraging them to go first with problems like that, or potential problems like that, to their poll site coordinator.
Very good.
Absolutely.
One unfortunate experience in the past when we had with voting is that some people will go to their site and the machines would be broken, or if the ballots are incorrect for the site. We know that the poll workers are on top of that in a sense, and they're reporting things as they go. But what advice would you give, Valerie, to a voter who encounters a problem and can't scan their ballot? What should they do?
So each site has a minimum of two scanners. So in the event that one were to go down, then they would just revert everyone to that second scanner. But in any case, if there are any instances where a scanner is down, if there's a paper jam, if the ballot marking device is not working, those are all things that our coordinators are trained to automatically contact the Board of Elections. We have teams that are available that we dispatch, technicians, AD monitoring teams, assembly district monitoring teams that will go out and immediately resolve the problem. But in terms of One of the most one of the most common problems is going to the wrong poll site and your name not being in the book, because in the poll pad, because you are in the wrong poll site. So again, that's just echoes what Kevin said earlier. We ask that the voters do make sure before they leave, just check to make sure that you're going to the right poll site. Although I will say that we have a total of 88 early voting sites citywide, and a total of a little over 1,200 sites for election day citywide. So while you see other states have decreased the number of sites, maybe partially because of COVID and the concerns that the sites themselves have, we in the city of New York have increased our poll sites. So we really hope that will help and we won't see as many long lines because of that.
Great. And just to reiterate about the polling sites and where people can find their updated information about where they're supposed to be voting, their early voting site and their regular designated polling site. That's at vote.nyc.
So you can visit vote.nyc. There is on the bottom right, on the bottom left, actually, there is a tab that says find my poll site. Click on that, put in your street address, and your early voting site will populate, as well as the hours and the dates of operation, as well as your election day site as well. And just keep in mind that in most cases, your early voting site is different than your election day site.
Okay. So let's shift gears now to the absentee ballot, because it's a mail-in vote, obviously, or actually doesn't have to be mail-in voting. It can be dropped off at a polling site on election day or at the early voting site or at the Board of Elections office. Valerie, can you explain that, how that
Right.
works?
So we're saying voting absentee is as easy as 1, 2, 3. So what we're encouraging voters who are interested voting from home, voting via absentee ballot, that they should visit our website, vote.nyc, click on apply for an absentee ballot. The application is very simple. It will take you under 2 minutes. And then from there, we will receive that information. The board staff, the bipartisan staff will process that. And then we will send out your ballot to you directly at the place where you designate, at the location where you designate. You can also, alternatively, you can call us at 866-VOTE-NYC. You can email us, or you can actually mail us an application. Now, what that means is your application will then be mailed to you. You then can choose you have to sign and date that absentee ballot oath, send it to us, the envelope to us, and either you mail it or you can drop it off at any of the 1,300 sites that we will have open between now and election day. So we have our borough offices will be open tomorrow, where voters can drop off their absentee ballots at one of our borough offices. And starting Saturday, at every early voting site, you can drop off your absentee ballot. And then on November 3rd, every election day site, you will allow for your voter to drop off their absentee ballot as well. You don't have to wait in line. If you have your absentee ballot, your marked ballot, you can bring it right to the front of the line. There'll be a secure ballot box where you can drop it off, and we'll handle the rest.
Okay. How many I'm sorry, go ahead, Kevin.
No, sorry, I just want to jump in on one other thing, which is that that you can actually also check and confirm that your absentee ballot was received. So I want to just make sure that people know that, because we've had some members just express some concern, especially right now with the stories from the media over the last few months, are a little nervous about dropping their ballot in the mail. The BOE will confirm that they've received your ballot, so that can give folks some extra peace of mind if you can't make it in to drop it off in person.
Yes, absolutely. So on that same website, vote.nyc, where you can, there is a tab titled apply. There is a second tab titled track my ballot. And you can track not only that we received your application, that it was successfully processed. You can get notification when your ballot was mailed, and on the return end when we receive your ballot. And because of legislation that passed as well, we have the ability, the voters have the ability to cure. So if there is a defect on the ballot envelope, so for example, prior to this legislation, if you sent in a absentee ballot envelope and did not sign the ballot itself, the envelope itself, that would be cause to invalidate. Now there's an ability to cure. So a voter will be able to see why their ballot was deemed invalid, and then have the opportunity to fix that, so that where their vote will be counted. So that portal really has a wealth of information, and we hope voters will avail themselves of that.
Valerie, I have a quick question on that. If someone's ballot is deemed, needing of a cure, are they able to, they have to cure that or correct that through the absentee ballot, or can they then switch over to early vote or some
Oh, so
do they
that's a
use
great question. Yeah. So you have the ability to cure. We will send you notice. So you will get printed. If you provided us your email address, we will send you an email informing you of the defect and how you can cure it. But always, we want voters to keep in mind, if you requested an absentee ballot, even if you return that absentee ballot, you all have the ability to vote in person for the 9 days of early voting and the general election as well. And only your in-person vote will be counted. So meaning, if I, Valerie, requested an absentee ballot, I filled it out and mailed it, but then come Sunday, I decide, you know what, I'm gonna go over to my early voting site, only that vote will count. And when the staff is at the point when we are counting the absentee ballots, we will see that Valerie voted in person, and therefore that absentee ballot will be invalidated.
And that prevents a duplicate voting, obviously.
Correct. Right.
So vote once. That's
Right.
that's the thing.
Right.
I know as of last week, Valerie, there was about 750,000 absentee ballots.
Yep. So that was the
have gone
update
up?
last week, and now we are over 1 million. So we are
Over a million.
Yeah. And to say that this is historic numbers is, 4 years ago, we received a total of 65,000 absentee ballot requests. Compare that with today, where our number is over 1 million. It is definitely an unprecedented number for the board.
And I think with a number like that, of course, there's concern about like how fast an absentee ballot will be counted. Could you go into how that's going to go?
So by law, we can receive the ballots up until the timely postmarked ballots. So all absentee ballots have to have had been postmarked by November 3rd. But we have to allow, the election law states we have to allow for a week to receive them. So it is after that when we begin the process of canvassing those votes. And the canvass process is something that's open to the public. We will put up a schedule. It's transparent. It's open to the public. It's open to the media. And the process is, the staff has to do their due diligence. And when I say like the process, it means exactly what we talked about earlier. Our staff has to go through each of those absentee ballots and look in the system and confirm that that voter did not already vote in person. So all of that takes time, but it's something that our staff is, we're familiar with the fast-paced nature. We're familiar now with a higher, an increased volume as a result of the executive order. So it's something that we are ready for.
That's great. One thing I just wanted to follow up on was with regards to who can drop off a ballot. Now, if I have an absentee ballot, I can go wherever, to the designated sites and drop it off. But let's say my mother wanted to vote by absentee ballot and she gave it to me. Now that's perfectly fine if I did that and dropped it off on her behalf.
Absolutely. It's nothing that there's no prohibition. A voter I can give my grandmother can give it to me. I can have family or friends, as long as that voter feels confident that that individual is in fact going to take their ballot and drop it off either in a mailbox or at one of our ballot boxes. They're completely entitled to do that.
And I would just say that we're encouraging our members, if they do that or send it in, to check their the BOE system to confirm that the ballot was received. But yeah. Okay.
Given that it's going to take could take a couple of weeks before the votes are counted completely the absentee ballots, what will be reported preliminarily on November 3rd once the polls have closed?
So at the polls have closed, when the polls close on November 3rd, on our website, vote.nyc, there will be a banner that will populate at the close of polls that will be titled Unofficial Election Night Returns. And that's exactly what it is. It'll be the results for the in-person votes cast at the 88 poll sites, early voting poll sites across the city, and the 1,200 election day sites. And they refresh every 5 minutes. You'll be able to see them on a borough breakdown by contest. And as the results are uploaded, you will see that on the website. But that is only for the in-person results. Any of the absentee ballots will not be captured within those results. And I will say that every night at the close of polls during early voting, we put on our website, it's another tab, and it's titled Early Voting Check-ins. So if an individual was interested just to see what the turnout is like at early voting sites by borough, after the polls close every night, you will see a number of raw votes cast by borough early voting. So you can get a sense of how many people actually are voting early.
Great. Going back to the mail-ins, for a moment, obviously there are concerns about how long it's going to take the post office to deliver everything back and forth. There were cutbacks in August that have led to a mail shutdown in many places. I know the advice has been to vote early, Valerie, but at this point, about how long have you seen it a return between the day the ballot request gets sent out and the day you receive a ballot by mail?
It's difficult for me to say. I can't give you an exact day because it really varies. I do, speaking to what Kevin had mentioned before, I do encourage voters to visit the portal, and you can see the date that it was mailed out. And if you see that the date, if today is the 22nd and you see that your ballot was mailed on the 1st, then at this point, I would see there would be cause for you to contact the Board of Election, and we can always reprint and send it out. Because we can only tell you once it's mailed. Beyond that, the status update would just be out for delivery, and we really can't speak to the USPS's service at that point.
I know back in June we had an issue in one of the races where a bunch of ballots somehow didn't get postmarked.
Yes.
Could you talk about how the court changes that came as a result of that, as well as assurances that this time around, if something similar happens, the votes will still be counted?
So that there was in Brooklyn in particular, there was an area that I want to say it was about 50,000 ballots that were not postmarked. And unfortunately, if we received a ballot after the election and it was not postmarked, there's no way for the board to determine if that ballot was timely postmarked. So those votes were deemed invalid as a result. There was some court, there was actually litigation, and it was determined that we at the Board of Elections had to open up all of those ballots because the determination was the post office did not postmark them. So again, what we're encouraging is for voters to drop off their ballots at one of our early voting sites, or if they can, if they're going to get their absentee ballots, do not hold on to it. As soon as you get it and you mark it, drop it in the mail, so that way we can assure that it's postmarked timely and we receive it.
Kevin, you have any additional advice you want to add to that on the AARP's behalf?
Sure, and I think it kind of goes back to the other thing that we're really encouraging, which we've already mentioned, if you've mailed your ballot, to use their system to track and confirm that it was received. Just for that extra bit of security. And if you're not, if you're unsure about a postmark or something like that, I think that's a time you would want to reach out to the Board of Elections. You could also reach out to AARP just to check and find out what your options are. I think, never take for granted that something's delivered right now, especially when there's a system that can confirm it.
Okay. One thing that is kind of overlooked in a lot of conversations about voting is ballot marking devices, which are for individuals with visual disabilities and other disabilities that might preclude them from using the standard ballot. Valerie, can you talk about if there's any changes to how that is going to work?
So since 2010, as a result of the Help America Vote Act, we transitioned to a new voting system. And one of the main components was the ballot marking device. And the ballot marking device allows for voters with disabilities to vote independently and privately. And there's many, their functionality is allows for a sip and puff device for an individual who perhaps does not have use of their hands and needs that device to mark their ballot. We have headphones that can read the candidates' names aloud. It is a braille keypad, as well as rocker paddles. And again, this is just another mechanism for a voter who cannot, who previously needed assistance to mark his or her ballot, now can do it independently and privately. After they mark their ballot, they take it to the scanner, and it is scanned just like everyone else's ballot. So it's really about empowering the voter, allowing them to vote independently and privately. And every site, both early voting and election day site, will have a ballot marking device available.
And can you just go into what's being done to keep those safe and for each voter?
So what we talked about before is really keeping keeping voters safe. So our campaign this year is Vote Safe NYC, and there's various ways that you can vote safe. You can vote by via absentee, vote from the privacy of your own home or wherever you. There are many voters who've relocated during this pandemic. You can vote early and avoid the lines, or you can vote on election day. Either way, our focus is to keep the voter and the poll worker safe. And the ways that we are doing that are with the floor decals that are on the floor as soon as a voter enters, to encourage the social distancing. So those floor markers will designate where they should stand. We will have PPE available for the voter and the poll worker. We have the sanitizing wipes upon check-in. We have the sneeze guard, which protects both the voter and the poll worker at each of the tables. We instituted the key fob, which will allow for that contactless check-in. We have the pen/stylus for voters, and again, the consistent sanitary procedures that we have in place for to sanitize the machines. So again, the focus is keeping the voter and the poll worker safe.
I just want to add one thing, and that is, if you're worried about accessibility, or if you know that you're going to need, or if you had previously needed assistance, we're encouraging folks to kind of know exactly what the process will be for that specific assistance that you might need before you go.
Great to know. So I just want to remind everybody again, if they have any questions about voting, they can use the chat function, the Q&A function. Send your questions our way. We'll do the best that we can to answer them as we go. Just want to go through some of them. We touched on this before with regards to early voting. Andrew asks, do we have to indicate on our registration whether we wanted early voting? I don't think it has anything to do with it.
No. So early voting was as a result of legislation that passed that allowed for voters to have 9 extra days of early voting, to allow for a voter to vote at a time that's convenient to them. Previously, obviously, we were restricted by the voting day. It was 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Now you have 9 days of early voting, including 2 weekends. So it really was more about providing access to the polls. And it's something that you don't have to, as long as you register a registered voter, you can avail yourself and take advantage of early voting.
And if you voted by absentee ballot in the June primary, you're not going to automatically get a ballot.
No, you have to request another.
Right.
Unless you were a voter who was a permanent absentee. And we do have voters who are on the rolls as permanent absentee voters, and they consistently get it every election that they're available to participate in. But for everyone else, you would have to proactively request an application. You would have to fill out the application and request an absentee ballot.
Right.
And I assume people can look up just to confirm whether or not they're a permanent absentee or we're just an absentee for June.
Yes, you can. And you can visit our website again, vote.nyc. You can do a voter lookup. It is more common that we really push voters to do the voter lookup during primary, because it's very common for voters during a Democratic primary or a Republican primary to be interested in voting for a particular candidate and go to the polls only to find out their name is not in the book at the poll pad. And then we find out it's because they are registered blank or an independent and weren't eligible. But we do encourage voters, if they question if they are an active voter, or inactive status, they should visit our website under voter lookup, put up their name and information, and they will see their registration status.
Okay. One of our viewers, Jane, asks, how do we find out where the drop-off boxes are? And again, just to reiterate, it's the polling sites and the Board of Election offices, correct?
Yes, that's a great question. So if you visit our website, vote.nyc, there's a tab titled drop-off locations. When you click on that, it'll give you the hours and the dates of our then locations of our borough offices, because you can drop it off at any borough Board of Elections borough office, as well as all of the 88 poll sites throughout the city of New York for early voting, as well as the election day sites as well. So there's a tab for that.
Okay.
Just
Yeah, go ahead.
you don't have to drop it off at the place you're assigned to vote. You can drop them off at any of the drop-offs.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Zach asks, just, many states that have started early voting already, there's very long lines. And as the city battles, increase in cases of COVID-19 in certain parts of the city, is there any concern about the risk of virus spreading because of people being in the lines?
Again, with the way that we can protect ourselves is what we follow the CDC guidelines and the encouragement that we wear masks. And that's why we are requiring that our poll workers do so and encouraging the voters. So if anyone comes without a mask, we will give them a mask for them as well. But in those areas, there have been areas that have been identified in parts of Brooklyn and Queens as red zones. Those sites are still open. They will be early voting sites and there will be election day sites within those zones. But a voter who is concerned, they can always request an absentee ballot. That's basically the mechanism that we have in place for a voter who is concerned about voting in person.
Better safe than sorry. Definitely. Okay. So again, any other questions all of you might have, please submit them and we'll be happy to answer them as best as we can in the remaining time going forward. Just to reiterate, going back to finding the sites, I think that's really something that everybody is concerned about. It's going online to find it, vote.nyc and going and looking at the poll site finder. Is there an app, by the way, for the voting?
No, there's not. We don't have an app.
No app yet. Okay.
But the site itself is optimized for mobile phones. So if you just put in find my poll site.vote.nyc, it'll bring you right to the page itself.
Ah, yes. Thank you for. I guess just got one that was a reminder. Now, a couple of weeks ago, there was a bit of a snafu in which some of the residents complained that they received an absentee ballot that said absentee military ballots. There was a forgotten slash. Could you elaborate on what the situation is there, Valerie?
So yes, there was a error where the ballots themselves, the absentee ballots, were titled absentee military, and there should have been a slash between the two words. It should have been absentee / military. Voters, that is in fact your valid ballot, and you should mark that ballot and return it to the Board of Elections. It was an error, but the ballot itself is valid, and the reason is the military ballot and an absentee ballot are the same for that particular voter. So there was no difference, but there was an error. We apologize for the printer error, and we encourage you to mark that ballot and return it to us as soon as possible.
But if they had returned it, they can check and confirm that it was, with any questions like that. If they check and it says their ballot is received and confirmed, then they can rest assured that that ballot's going to be counted.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
well, some of our readers have asked about whether there's still a need for poll workers. Are we all set, Valerie?
So we are all set. We actually received historic amount of poll workers applications for this election. So we are already assigned our poll workers for early voting and the poll workers for election day. So we thank you, anyone who's interested in becoming a poll worker. We do encourage you to visit nyc.electiondayworker.com, and you can put in an application and you will be contacted for the next election. Poll workers must be trained, take an exam, and then they are ready to serve the voters of the city of New York.
And it's a paid position, correct?
It is a paid position, yes. If a voter worked all 10 days of early voting and all 9 days of early voting and the general election, they could have made potentially $2,800. So it is a paid position. You get paid for serving your community.
There you go. It's the best of both worlds. One other thing is that some people might want to, change their party affiliation to be eligible to vote next year in the citywide elections, primaries. What is the deadline for when a party change can be made?
So the deadline for this particular was February 14th. That
right.
was the deadline has passed for the party enrollment.
Okay,
but this is a
for next year,
election, right? But this is a general election, so you can be registered to any particular party, and you can cast your vote for the candidate that you see fit.
Of course,
but it is a general election.
Whether you're Democrat, Republican, Independent, third party, or even no party.
Yep.
You're eligible to vote, obviously, for this election. Yep. Okay. All right. So let's summarize what we've gone through here. We have the early voting coming up on Saturday. It begins a 9-day process where everybody goes out to vote. You find your polling site at the vote.nyc website. You have information that was sent out to all the homes, to all the registered voters, I should say, and let's, Valerie, you want to add anything to that? You're welcome to do so.
No, I just want to, thank you again for hosting this. This is fantastic. We encourage voters, everyone who participated in this webinar and the previous one, to really go out and talk to your family members, your neighbors, anyone that you can help us educate in terms of the importance of visiting our website to find your location. Also, we want to try to push the voters who vote in person. We want to push the use of the FastPass tag, because we really do think that it will help not only for the contactless check-in, which is an added benefit, but the reality is, by just bringing this to your poll site, it really will speed up the processing time for the poll workers, because then you won't have to go through spelling of my last name, my address. It will help in check-in. So this is probably one of the most recent advancements that we've had, and we hope voters bring them to the sites.
See, now you and Kevin both displayed it. I do have one myself.
Nice.
So there you go. So I'm ready to go with my FastPass on Saturday. And regardless of how you decide to vote, whether it's early voting, absentee ballot voting, or voting on election day itself, the key important thing to do is go vote. So thank you again for all your help on this.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you to all the attendees for being here. Thank you, Valerie Vasquez of Board of Elections. Thank you, Kevin Jones of AARP New York City. Thank you, AARP of New York City, AARP New York City, for sponsoring this very, very important webinar. And I hope all of your questions were answered. And I wish you all well as you go to vote.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Take care.